I never imagined I'd have to admit this publicly. Law enforcement officers conducted a raid on my land, and the catalyst was a homeowners association conflict. They arrived wearing tactical gear, carrying weapons and official-looking documentation, though every aspect of their operation was fraudulent. The amusing part, while they believed they were executing a clever scheme, they had actually stumbled directly into my carefully laid trap. Let me begin this tale from its origin. Before we proceed, I'm curious about your location as you listen to this story today. Have you ever pursued a goal for so long that when you finally achieve it, you question its reality? That described my situation perfectly, relaxing on a porch I constructed myself, drinking coffee cultivated on distant land, gazing across 120 acres of liberty I had purchased through hard work and sacrifice. No supervisors, no pre-dawn phone calls, no hostile strangers shouting at me, just myself, my canines, my goats, a tractor with more years than some of my joints, and tranquility. Not the unsettling kind of quiet, but the type that allows your nervous system to relax, the kind that softly confirms you found your sanctuary. When I purchased this ranch, I believed my days of confrontation were behind me. I was mistaken. The situation began with a placard, white plastic secured to my fence as if it belonged there. Notice property under review, Simmons Valley 8, compliance required. I stared at it for a full 60 seconds, expecting it might clarify itself. It remained silent, so I tore it down, threw it into my burn barrel, and attributed it to bored teenagers pretending to be an HOA. That was my first error, underestimating the lengths people will go when they believe a clipboard grants them authority. My second mistake was assuming Karen would cease her activities, because the following day she appeared. And SUV, the shade of medical facility walls positioned halfway across my driveway like part of a strategic maneuver. Out stepped a woman wearing pastel pink, creased caucus, and reflective sunglasses, clipboard secured like a weapon under her arm. She didn't observe my property, she studied me as if I were an issue requiring resolution. "Hello there," she chirped as though we were about to trade baked goods recipes. I cleaned my hands with a cloth and leaned against the fence post. "Can I assist you?" "I'm Karen Simmons, a la president, just making my rounds. I wanted to personally greet you to the community." I blinked. "Oh," she smiled more broadly. "Simmons Valley Homeowners Association. We're a chartered community coalition dedicated to preserving visual and environmental standards across properties." I actually chuckled. "This is agricultural land. The only visual standard here is avoiding collisions with cattle." She remained unfazed. "Our regulations address fencing height, structural types, livestock ratios, and noise limits. We're currently in an awareness phase, but violations will commence at months at madam." I said, "You can't issue citations to a goat." "Oh, we don't cite the goats," she replied sweetly, "just their owners." She handed me a manila envelope marked, "Welcome package, action required." Before I could respond, she turned on her orthopedic heel and departed as though she'd just delivered a court summons. I opened it immediately. Page after page of fabricated regulations, diagrams of my barn with red circles, photographs of my fencing from angles I didn't know existed. Apparently, my satellite dish was visible from the southern viewing corridor, constituting a visual obstruction. I didn't discard it, I incinerated it. 2 days later, new signs materialized, larger, laminated, secured higher. One was stapled to my barn door, "Under enforcement review, violations pending." I removed them again. This time they returned with nails, and not just signs. 2 men appeared, late 30s, matching caucus, vests with iron on patches reading HOA patrol. I observed from the porch as they walked my fence line with walkie-talkies and clipboards like they were conducting some kind of operation. One even gestured at my tractor and spoke into his microphone. I stepped off the porch, they froze like deer hearing a gunshot. "Something I can help you gentlemen with?" One spoke nervously, rehearsed. "We're conducting a compliance inspection under HOA protocol." I approached closer. "Got a badge. We operate under the Simmons Valley Charter." "Excellent, then you're trespassing under the Callahan Property Charter. Leave." They departed, but not before one dropped his clipboard. Inside, patrol maps, property routes marked with red X. Mine was labeled Alpha, High Resistance. I photographed it, then contacted a friend in town, a sheriff's deputy. He hadn't heard of any HOA, but he knew Karen. "Oh yeah," he said. "She tried to cite the feed store last year, called it a rural noise disturbance." That's when I understood this wasn't an isolated incident. Karen had schemes, plans that extended beyond laminated signs, plans involving men with walkie-talkies, fake websites, patrols, and potentially worse. I began preparing not for warfare but for absurdity. Motion detectors, trail cameras, remote lighting, nothing lethal, just sufficient to remind them this land fights back. Because the next time they crossed my boundary, they wouldn't depart with just a warning. And when they returned, they didn't knock. They arrived before sunrise in silence with reinforcements. But they were unaware they had just entered a place where I established the rules. You never forget the sound of trouble attempting stealth. There's a distinct rhythm, measured, almost careful, like a heartbeat just slightly too rapid. I heard it before seeing anything. The wind was still, sky remained black. Even the chickens hadn't begun their usual morning disputes. But that gravel crunched, too heavy for wind, too light for a truck, too coordinated for a deer. I didn't panic, just grabbed my boots and mug already half filled with yesterday's reheated coffee. Muscle memory, I didn't need to look. I already knew they had returned. Fake OA forces, Karen's clipboard commandos. I had anticipated they'd try again, just not this quickly. I entered the kitchen and switched off the interior lights, steadied my breathing and listened. Crunch, poch, crunch, crunch. Multiple footsteps, 5, maybe 6. I moved to the side window. By the barn, 5 shadows moved in a loose arc, flashlights off, radio earpieces in, vests, khakis. One guy had a clipboard again, because apparently even paramilitary pretenders need documentation. But the highlight, they had headlamps now, strapped to their foreheads like miners or discount special forces. I crouched low and scanned. 3 veered toward the east fence where Linda the goat slept like royalty. 2 others remained near the front gate. Then came the voice, crackling and half-whispered through one of their radios. Team Alpha in position. Begin sweep. Target is presumed armed but compliant under Phase 1. Target presumed armed. Phase 1. I chuckled because what else do you do when the neighborhood watch thinks they're raiding Farmer Bin Laden? But the laugh didn't reach my eyes. Something in me had already shifted. That old hum returned, the one I hadn't felt since Kandahar. The weight behind the eyes, the coiled breath in the lungs. Awareness training, threat assessment. I moved to the modroom, slipped on the coat with the emergency light trigger in the pocket. Not because I needed it, but because I wanted to see what happened when they saw me. They crossed the second fence quietly, confidently, until one tripped the wire. Click, then boom. Not an explosion, a flood of light and sound. High-beam floodlights burst on like I'd summoned divine intervention with a remote. Sirens screamed from 4 different locations. The barn illuminated like Times Square. 2 guys dropped flat. One screamed and dove behind the water trough. Another collided with Linda's enclosure. Bad decision. Linda rammed him in the thigh, flipped him over, then stared down at him as if she expected an explanation. I stepped onto the porch. Didn't rush, didn't shout. Just sipped my coffee and said, "Good morning, gentlemen. Y'all planning to announce yourselves, or were you hoping for the element of surprise?" One straightened, clipboard guy. "We are acting under HOA Emergency Code 7A to seize non-compliant property." Emergency Code 7A. I raised an eyebrow. "Did y'all create that in a coloring book?" He didn't flinch. "We are empowered by community vote to remove unauthorized structures, reclaim misused land, and enforce property value security. You going to enforce it with that clipboard?" Another one, shaking, sweating, raised something that looked like a taser. "This is a citizens enforcement zone," he said, voice cracking. "We are within operational bounds." I took one step down from the porch. "You're in my yard, armed, threatening seizure of property under fake laws printed on a library computer." Clipboard guy pulled out a folder. "This document authorizes us." I snatched it. Half the pages said draft, one had a coffee stain, and what looked like melted cheese stuck to the corner. "This looks like it was written by a sleep-deprived 10th grader with control issues." Suddenly, gravel tires. A car, but not one of theirs. Sheriff Langston. Red and blue lights stuttered down the driveway like divine intervention. Squad car rolled in slow and loud. The HOA enforcers froze. Clipboard guy turned to abort, but it was too late. Langston stepped out, squinting into the chaos. One of the fake cops was still being yelled at by Linda. Another had buried his face in the dirt like it offered legal protection. Langston looked at me deadpan. "Callahan, what the hell is this? Dinner theater? Ice opening act?" HOA SWAT team. And Langston turned to the group. "Hands where I can see them. Drop the clipboards." One guy actually said, "We're acting under civilian compliance jurisdiction." And Langston walked right up, grabbed the badge on his vest, and ripped it clean off. "Buddy, this says Compliance Officer Tier 2. You're lucky it doesn't say Mall Cop." He held up a binder, leather-bound, homemade. The cover, Simmons Valley Compliance Authority Internal Codex. Langston flipped through. Color-coded charts, rank structure, lamination. God help me, there were pages labeled violation classes. Langston read aloud: Class 1 violation, fencing misalignment. Class 2 unauthorized rooster activity. Class 3 hostile resident behavior. He snapped the book shut. "I've seen cults with fewer rules." One guy blurted out, "We were told to enforce protocol." "Be who?" Langston glanced at me. I said it first scene. "Karen, 3 arrests, 2 citations, 1 full report filed with the county investigator." But the kicker, Langston found a list tucked in the binder. A spreadsheet with names. Mine highlighted: raid, obstructionist, high threat, out. Langston whistled. "You know any of these?" "Yeah," I said. "Neighbors. 2 sold out this year, 1 went dark." "This isn't just Che cosplay," he said. "This is coordinated, targeted." He sighed. "I'll call in a fraud investigator, maybe even the feds." "But you should know, Karen's doubling down. She's not quitting." I already knew, because later that night a certified letter landed in my mailbox. Karen was suing me for hostile disruption of a sanctioned community action, for undermining volunteer enforcement personnel, for intentional obstruction of cooperative land reclamation. And the worst part, she had a real lawyer. Someone was funding her. Someone with more reach than a folding table and a clipboard. And tucked inside the envelope was a list of names. Not just mine, not just neighbors, but one name I knew better than anyone. Someone I'd shared beers with, someone who helped build my barn. And next to their name, a single word: informant. They say power corrupts, but what nobody tells you is how fast it happens when the only thing standing between someone and total control is a clipboard. Karen didn't fold after the arrests. She didn't back down. She doubled down and dragged the whole damn neighborhood with her. It started with the flyers. She didn't just post them in mailboxes, she launched them. Printed in grayscale, clipped to plastic stakes, stabbed into the ground at the road entrance like military signage. Each one had a photo of my property, aerial shot, probably from a drone, labeled Zone B non-compliant high risk. Below that, bullet point: seeing unauthorized livestock, illegal fencing configuration, documented verbal hostility to enforcement officers. Then the best part: subject has refused all attempts at reintegration. Neighbors are advised to avoid unsanctioned contact. I couldn't believe it. She was distributing social exile notices. But the worst of it, it worked. Neighbors who used to wave stopped making eye contact. The guy who sold me feed quietly raised his prices. One of the families who came to my 4th of July cookout last year posted a message in the community group: "We support order. We support community standards. If you're not part of the solution, you're part of the risk." I stood in my field, staring at a sign about my hostile goats, and realized this wasn't a petty feud anymore. Karen was building a regime, and then she held the rally. In her driveway. No chairs, no permits, just a fold-out table, a microphone and a poster board that read, Emergency Compliance Briefing, Tier 3 Response. I stood across the street, didn't hide, just watched. At least 15 people showed up. Some looked confused, some looked scared. A few were already wearing co-branded safety vests. Karen tapped the mic. "We're under siege," she said, "and it's coming from within." She held up one of the flyers with my property photo. "This resident has refused compliance for 3 consecutive review cycles. He has verbally threatened officers. He has refused dialogue." She pointed at me. "Thinks he's untouchable, but no one is above the rules." She passed out flyers like communion wafers. "He may call it freedom. We call it negligence. We call it disorder." I shouted across the road, "You call a goat screaming at 6 a.m. a security threat?" Karen ignored me. Effective immediately, the OA is initiating a community isolation protocol. Residents are discouraged from contact. No favors, no support, no engagement. The crowd nodded. Some clapped. That was when I realized it wasn't just propaganda. She had followers. Later that night, I found a notice in my mailbox. It wasn't mailed, it was laminated. Resident classification Tier 3 critical non-compliant. Under it, remove livestock, paint barn neutral gray, add and re-education seminar and submit apology statement to board. There was even a time and date listed for the seminar. Location Karen's garage. One of the sessions was called Silent Fences, How Your Property Speaks for You. I nearly choked. This was Orwell with a polo shirt, but it got worse. 2 of my trail cams went offline the next day, then a third. When I checked the wiring, they'd been cut. Langston came out. "You think it's her? She's the only one who knows where I put these." He nodded. "She's not just posturing anymore." That night, a white sedan parked 2 properties down. Didn't move. I watched it through binoculars. Tinted windows, no tags, just idling. I walked toward it with a flashlight. The engine revved and it peeled out. The plates registered to something called Community Horizon Outreach. The director, Karen. She'd built a shell nonprofit just to cover surveillance. And then came Max, my dog, border collie, 8 years old, smarter than most people I've worked with. That night I heard him whimpering near the barn. I found him behind the ATV, shaking, one paw bleeding. He yelped when I touched it. Blood. Deep cut, embedded glass. I checked the barn floor. Found a jagged shard scattered near the rear door. Green, brown glass, purposefully hidden. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just picked him up and whispered, "It's okay. I've got you." Langston arrived 20 minutes later. He swept the area, took samples. "This wasn't an accident," he said. "This was a message." And he was right, because I'd reached my line, and Karen had just danced over it. The next day I went public. I uploaded everything, the video of the fake raid, the fake seizure warrants, her flyers, Max's injury, surveillance logs, the HOAs law book, and laminated re-education guides. I posted it with a caption, "When the HOA thinks they're the FBI." Within hours the video exploded. Comments, shares, messages from other rural homeowners who'd seen the same tactics in their areas. Within 24 hours it had over 300,000 views. People started turning. Karen's online defenders vanished. Her compliance team, half of them resigned. But she wasn't done, because 2 days later she showed up at my door. No clipboard, just a manila folder. No smile. "You think this is about goats?" I said nothing. "You think this ends with me?" She stepped forward, voice low. "You've kicked something you don't understand." She handed me the folder, then walked away. Inside, printed emails, signed memos, a document labeled Regional Initiative Rural Behavioral Management Phase 2. It had government seals, contacts I recognized, people I'd worked with years ago. It wasn't just HOA nonsense anymore. This wasn't local. This was federal. That folder didn't just implicate Karen, it exposed something bigger. A plan, a network. And my name was listed as primary resistance node. They thought I'd be easy to silence. They forgot who I used to be and what I still am. The folder sat on my kitchen table for 6 hours before I opened it again. Not because I was afraid of what I'd find, but because I already knew what it meant. It had government headers, agency abbreviations, real formatting, not the stuff Karen printed at the UPS store. The top page, Rural Behavioral Management Phase 2. I stared at it like it was an old enemy, because in a way it was. This wasn't just paperwork, this was doctrine. I'd seen it before, overseas. Back when our job wasn't to fight, it was to reshape communities. Post-conflict engagement zones, they called them. But we knew what it really was: control through soft power. Change the signs, change the rules, change the way people talk about their neighbors. And now it was here in a 3-ring binder, carried to my doorstep by a woman whose hobby was code enforcement cosplay. Langston pulled up 2 hours later. I didn't say anything at first, just slid the folder across the table. He opened it, flipped through page by page. "Where'd you get this?" She gave it to me. "On purpose." She said I'd kicked something I couldn't stop. Langston closed the folder, then he called the county attorney. She came out same day, tough, sharp, rolled in with an investigator and a portable scanner. They took the folder apart, scanned every page, ran the headers, verified the stamps. Then she looked at me. "Did you know this program?" "I knew the people who built it." As she blinked. "You were in on this?" "No, but I was in the room." The state got involved fast. Within 24 hours we had a warrant. Karen's name was now tied to at least 5 separate cases across county lines, all involving false citations, impersonation, and real financial loss. The goal had always been land quietly, push out rural owners, consolidate properties, enforce uniform standards through scare tactics and bureaucracy. Karen wasn't the author, she was the test pilot. Langston and 2 agents rolled out the next morning, warrant in hand, cruiser out front, dash cam rolling. They knocked. Nothing. Knocked again, curtain shifted, but no answer. Finally she opened it, wearing that same smug smirk, clipboard in hand like it had diplomatic immunity. "Do you have a warrant?" Langston held it up. She didn't even flinch. "You're making a mistake." "You first," he said, stepping inside. The search started in her study. Books, maps, a fake HA ledger. Then the real find, behind a false panel in the bookshelf, a narrow doorway. No knob, just a sliding latch. Inside a back office. It was surgical. Wall-to-wall binders, a whiteboard with names and faces, map, schedules, rotation charts, a bank of monitors all turned off. 3 of them had camera feeds still paused. One of those was my barn. There were 6 labeled binders: resident tier guide, compliance scripts, corrective language index, psychological reinforcement tactics, asset conversion model, phase 3 strategy outline. Langston flipped through the first. Inside zine, files on me. My name, my property layout, my habits. You wake up around 40-50 most mornings. Feed animals by 6. Occasionally leave lights on in the front room past midnight. Rarely seen with visitors. Pattern writing. Defiant, autonomous, vigilant. Looked at me. They were profiling you. Not just me. He flipped again. 6 other residents. All categorized. 1 labeled, exit achieved. 1 labeled, pending disruption. That last one, she'd moved out last month. They found a wall map in the back. 3 counties. Red pins, blue pins, black pins. Each labeled with a code: P1 probationary, P2 P3 physical relocation encouraged. Langston stepped back. "This isn't OA. This is psychological warfare." We bagged everything. The attorney filed charges that afternoon: criminal harassment, wire fraud, identity manipulation, illegal surveillance, impersonating a public official, conspiracy to defraud. Karen's lawyer tried to spin it, said it was a community experiment in grassroots cohesion. Langston called it what it was: a cult with a mailing list. That night someone knocked at my gate. Jerry, the neighbor who'd stopped waving. He looked broken. "I didn't know it would go this far," he said. "You believed her?" He didn't answer, just looked at the dirt. "She told us if we didn't help enforce it, we'd be next." I nodded once, closed the gate behind him. 2 days later, the county cracked the last hard drive, and what we saw blew the case wide open, because it wasn't just me. There were files on 6 other properties. Video reports, drone footage, fencing audits, even voice recordings from porch conversations. These people didn't just want your land, they wanted to watch you first, predict you, control you, then erase you. And Karen, she wasn't the only node in the system. One of the signatures on the Phase 2 proposal was someone I knew, an old intel officer, retired, last seen consulting in DC. I stared at it for a long time. Not because I was shocked, but because I knew exactly what kind of people they were and what they'd do to keep their blueprint from unraveling. One last drive was labeled, Phase 4 Contingency. It was locked, encrypted, but the title said enough. Because Phase 3 was about control and Phase 4, that meant someone was planning for failure or resistance, and they were ready to act. Which meant I had 1 shot left before this thing went national, and I was taking it head on. The drone came back at 40:12 a.m. Same low hum, different model, faster, smaller, smarter. It didn't hover this time, it swept low across the barn roof, then buzzed the tree line and disappeared. 15 minutes later, I found a circle burned into the ground near the north fence. Perfectly symmetrical, black paint. 2 slash lines cutting through the middle like an X. Same symbol Langston found on the Clearwater property. Same one used on their non-compliant targets. It wasn't just a warning, it was a marking. And whatever it meant they were coming. They didn't knock, they didn't call, they didn't send another flyer. They just walked in. 3 of them. No headlights, no vehicle in sight. I spotted them on the southwest cam first. Thermal signature said they'd been sitting in the woods for 20 minutes. Now they were approaching my driveway. Black vests, boots, walkie-talkies muted. One held a clipboard. The other 2 had rifles, real ones. Clean, tightly slung. I didn't panic. I shut the laptop, locked the barn, walked calmly back to the porch, watched them. Didn't speak. They didn't either. Then clipboard guy stepped forward. "We're here for seizure protocol. You think this is legal?" I asked. He didn't blink. "You failed to comply with re-education notices. Your vehicle and property are listed as forfeitable under Emergency Clause B9. He pulled a page from his folder and held it up like it meant something. "You've been designated as a primary resistance node." The man to his right twitched, kept glancing at the trees, kept adjusting his grip. The one on the left calm, too calm, eyes glassy, focused not on me but on the door behind me. "You're outnumbered," clipboard guy said. "Don't make this hard." I stepped forward 1 pace. "Tell me something," I said. "What? Who trained you?" He hesitated. That's when I knew they weren't real, not law, not military. They were believers. They took another step forward. I stepped back, tapped the silent trigger on my watch. Steel barriers rose from the driveway with a low hiss. Motion sensors pinned. Floodlights engaged, not steady beams. Disorienting, meant to confuse. Clipboard guy shielded his eyes. Twitchy guy raised his rifle. That was his mistake. My deck rig kicked in. 2 flashbangs deployed from opposite corners. No shrapnel, just pressure and sound, loud enough to reset your brain for 30 seconds. They dropped, and just like that, my field turned into theirs, except I'd planned for this. As they flailed, I moved under the side stair, rolled right, hit the failsafe line I hadn't tested in 2 years, a buried cable set to trigger an old theft deterrent system I had rigged for equipment haulers. Across the field, 4 directional sirens fired up, piercing, oscillating frequency, coded to bounce off the barn and scatter echoes. The sound disoriented them instantly. Twitchy guy staggered, rifle half raised, blind. I closed the distance, grabbed the barrel, twisted, drove his shoulder into the gravel with my full weight. He didn't even fight. The calm one turned to run but stopped cold. Langston's cruiser had arrived. No siren, no lights, just his voice, weapons down. He stepped out, sidearm drawn, back up behind him. Real law, real response. Clipboard guy tried to reach for something. Langston fired a warning shot, not into the air, into the dirt, a puff of dust between the man's boots. He froze. I said now. They dropped their weapons, all of them. 4 more emerged from the woods, hands raised. 7 in total, armed, trained poorly, but enough to be dangerous. Langston cuffed the first one, turned to me. They said they were part of something bigger. I nodded. They're not bluffing. Karen, her playbook, her language, her followers. Langston held up a badge he had pulled off one of their vests, Enforcement Tier 1, Phase 4 certified. You know what that means? I do now. At the station they processed all 7. Most of them wouldn't talk, but the quiet one did. Right before they loaded him into the cruiser, he looked at me through the bars, smiled. Phase 4 isn't about you? I didn't speak. You think it ends here? You think this was about land? He leaned closer to the bars. It's about pattern disruption. You're not the enemy, you're the prototype. Then he winked, and they took him away. We found more on them: forged IDs, maps, training schedules. One of them had a printed set of instructions for emergency engagement scenarios. Another had a laminated citizen arrest card. But the most disturbing find, a group photo. 10 people, all in vests, all with fake patches. Karen in the middle. And a title above it, Phase 4 Ground Team Unit 7, which meant there were at least 6 more. Langston and I stood on the porch later that night, Max at my feet. The air still hadn't shifted. You think they'll come again? He asked. They won't stop, I said. Not until this goes public or I disappear. He looked at me sideways. You have a plan? I nodded toward the last uncracked drive on my table. It's labeled with my name. You gonna open it? Not yet. He waited. What are you waiting for? I looked out across the field. Leverage. Because inside that drive was the final piece. And once I opened it, once I saw what they had on me, I wouldn't just be defending my land, I'd be dragging the truth out of the shadows. And it wouldn't just end Karen's legacy, it might end mine. The last drive didn't come with a label, just my name, Callahan, sharpied in block letters. No logo, no date, no context. It sat on my kitchen table for 4 days. Not because I was scared, but because I knew once I opened it, once I saw what was on it, there'd be no going back. Langston offered to run it through evidence systems. I said no. If they'd spent this much time watching me, then they deserved to see me watching back. When I finally clicked it open, the screen flashed once, then a logo appeared. OPRM, Operational Rural Management. Not HOA, not county, not Karen, federal. A program I hadn't heard mentioned in a decade. I knew the name because I'd helped write part of it. 12 years ago, I'd submitted a report, outlined weaknesses in rural command structures, suggested techniques for post-instability recalibration. They hadn't just used my report, they'd built this entire framework from it. The drive held 4 folders: Phase 1 infiltration, Phase 3 conditioning, Phase 3 pressure, Phase 4 correction. Inside me. Drawn footage, porch cams, audio from the barn, conversations with Langston. Every file had a label: Subject Callahan. Classification: autonomous, strategic, influence resistant. Then came the recording, my own voice, a call from years ago outlining protocol for managing outlier behavior clusters. They didn't just weaponize a system against me, they used my own damn blueprints. Next were the personnel files. Karen's HOA presidency, funded, promoted, managed. Her flyers, her committees, her compliance task force, all part of a beta rollout under a shell nonprofit. She wasn't the architect, she was the instrument. And I wasn't the enemy, I was the test. Then came the final file, message, Tier Alpha. Karen appeared on screen, clean, calm, smiling like this was a church announcement. If you're watching this, then you saw the truth. I didn't start this, but I believed in it. Still do. People like you don't obey, you disrupt. That's why we needed you. You showed us what resistance looks like and how to break it. Then she smiled and the screen cut to black. I sat in silence. Not because I was broken, but because I was steady. Langston showed up an hour later. You opened it. How bad? Bad enough. He waited.
What now? I ended.
I didn't go to the press, I went to the source. Filed a federal whistleblower complaint, redacted the neighbors, named the contractors, attached every file. Then I hit publish. The story went wide. Former employees came forward, oversight hearings opened. Karen was indicted again, this time on federal charges, and UP-RM officially decommissioned. Again. But paperwork doesn't stop ideology. Things are quiet now. Max still limps, but he runs. The barn holds. The goats yell. The fences stay up. But the weight, it doesn't leave. Sometimes Max growls when a truck slows at the gate. It never stops, but it never doesn't pause. I still get messages from strangers. It started here too. They called it a volunteer coalition. The documents look real. We thought we were the only ones. They ask me what to do. I always say the same thing. Don't wait for someone else to fight your battle. Because if they've already drawn the map, you're already on it. There was one final email buried in the drive, encrypted, deliberately hidden. We cracked it. No body, no signature, just a subject line: reassignment, Peel at Zone Midwest Beta.